Live from Radio Row at Super Bowl 59, this is Roy Kessel for Sports Philanthropy Network, and today we're very excited to have with us a special guest. So I want to have you introduce yourself. We just met the other night.
Yep, absolutely.
Heard part of your story, so I want you to share that story with our audience.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. It's incredible to be here with media at Super Bowl. So my name is Jonathan Sutter. I run the largest nonprofit resource center of its kind in the world. It's called Traveling Wiki. What we are doing is opening up access to air travel for 20 million Americans and people around the world with autism, ALS, Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, and PTSD. What we are doing is enabling those community members to find resources across the airport ecosystem to be able to access flying. The reason it is really relevant for a place like the Super Bowl is if you have a child with autism and you want to take that journey from Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle to come to New Orleans for a sports game, you want your child to play college and sports, go off to college, remote work, all those things often require air travel. So that's what we're trying to open up.
Well, I think one of the things you hit on is really important, is helping people get access to that travel. I have a younger sister who's developmentally disabled, and she's mobile, so she's able to walk and do things, maybe not super long distances. But I know so many people in our network, there's so many organizations that work with people with disabilities of all types, right? And the issues relating to everything that you're talking about, the accommodations aren't there in most of these environments, not only in getting into the airports, but moving through the airports, getting on and off of the planes, sitting on the planes, getting on up and down from seats.
Yes.
Right? There's a lot of issues that we take for granted if we're in good health and mobile, right? It's like, okay, my legs are a little tired. I had this many steps today. But we don't really understand how challenging that is for people in those communities.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. It's not just about inconvenience for these community members. It's often a disabling situation that precludes these individuals, whether they be somebody like, say, with an elderly person with Parkinson's, dementia, somebody of any age with autism, from engaging in the airline, in the aviation ecosystem. And those families either just drive or they don't go at all. And what we are trying to do, think of this, the amazing opportunity to be able to have your child and attend a professional sports game. We're trying to make sure it's accessible, not telling people they must, but we want to present the resources via the government's website, by our own, which connects to us, so that they have the resources to know what are their options.
And we've seen it, right? We work with organizations, right, that deal with disabilities that are, mobility impairment, right? We deal with blind, deaf. There's so many different areas that exist, right? When you walk into a stadium and you experience a sporting event, right, you're really feeling it with all of your senses.
Absolutely.
And we take that for granted a little bit. And even though we might be able to say, like, hey, the team or the league or organization should create these accommodations, many of them are not easy to recreate.
No.
But even some that are relatively low cost or low difficulty are still not being done. Why aren't they being done?
So what we have tried to do is get involved with some specific sports games where we present to the autism community and others in an environment where children who sometimes are never able otherwise to go to the sports activity are able to go. So an example of that is the Akron Rubber Ducks. So I'm from Northeast Ohio. The Akron Rubber Ducks, Ken Babby, who's the owner of Fast Forward Sports, we helped collaboratively hold the first ever Autism Awareness Pro Baseball game. And they used an area that's like a club lounge, closed it off for that particular game, and it was a quiet environment so kids who are neurodiverse could, in their own separate environment, enjoy the game. And then everybody else is not affected. There's no impact to anybody. It doesn't impact anyone else's enjoyment of their experience. They get the same experience, but they have a section that those individuals. We did the same thing with Pittsburgh Pirates. We did 2 games in 2024 that we were part of. We presented at one. It was the club lounge. One, it was like a loge. And in that particular situation, it wasn't like the whole game. It was like people had 10 minutes where they could go in and have a moment with their child who may have autism. What we are trying to do is ensure that there's access to these resources, and it's not meant to impact anybody else. What we're trying to do is make sure there's some way for families, to enjoy the same things we all enjoy.
Well, and I think you hit on such a key point, right? We just want enjoyment, right? We want our kids to be able to experience something.
Yes.
And just because you have a disability doesn't mean that you have less of a passion
Yes.
for enjoying the sport. Maybe it impacts an ability to play the sport. In today's world, there's an enormous number of adaptive sports organizations, athletes with all types of disabilities playing high level sports. But to be able to go to a sport, we see groups like one of them that I've seen, Culture City.
Absolutely, and they've been so involved in the city of Philadelphia and beyond, and here. Absolutely.
And it's great because we're seeing this now as we walk around more and more stadiums, and you'll see a sensory room
Yes,
where
that's
somebody
extraordinary.
can come and have that little respite from the noise. I think, I'm somebody that's not super reactive, but I know a lot of people that are, right? These lights, all the noise, all the movement going on here is something that at the end of a day causes a lot of strain and stress on that person's mind and body and everything else. And that's even though they have all of their senses. So when somebody loses and removes one of those senses, they're very much beholden to what we can recreate.
And one of the things that I think is important to note, going to see sports, for me at least as a kid, was not just about seeing the sports game. It was when I grew up in Cleveland. So when I saw the early 90s Cleveland Cavs of Mark Price, Brad Daugherty, Larry Nance, I learned when I went to see and got interested in Mark Price about his focus on being an incredibly hard worker and practicing all the time and shooting free throws. That was important for me to experience as a kid, to learn about, like hard work in life. And it taught me a lot. And I think for these families, it's not solely one of the things that I focus on is delivering resources and talking about this. Sports is a metaphor for life in so many different ways. It gets you interested in other things. It opens up pathways, you potentially playing sports. Like, that's why I'm so passionate about this, because it's not just the leisure of seeing sports, it's also engaging with it.
But your passion shines through. When we met the other night at the JCC and you talked about, went up there and asked that question, I think one of the things that is important is having somebody like yourself that's willing to stand up and be vocal.
Yeah.
And challenge the status quo.
Yeah.
Right? There's amazing power in this room, but at the same time, a lot of people are scared to push back, scared to make waves, scared to say to professional sports organizations, major college sports teams, all kinds of sports, that, hey, you know what, you got to do better. Like, you've got the power, you've got the resources, you've got a facility and a venue. You need to make this accessible. There's no reason that you can't do it.
The way we have chosen to approach this, and I think it's a really important point you raise, what we want to do is provide to families that may not have access to the resources the ability to learn about those resources in a way they can consume. That's why we're in 12 languages. That's why we try and be as accessible as possible. And we have chosen not to tell individual organizations, you must. What we're trying to do is say, here's a platter of resources. We want you to have access. And we hope that the sports community, in seeing that platter of resources, will say, we want more resources, because we see that in Philadelphia, there's an amazing sensory quiet room and the like. And we know that Eagles fans may come to see us in XYZ city, so we need to make sure our airport has those resources as well.
Jonathan, I appreciate all the hard work you're putting into this. I think it's crucial to have allies like you, and we look forward to seeing how we can partner and explore that in more detail.
Thank you so much for
making
everything.
time.
Thank you.
And for all of our viewers and listeners, we appreciate you taking time to join us at Sports Philanthropy Network. We're signing off. Roy Kessel signing off live from Radio Row at Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans. Please remember to live generously.